All right, it is Wednesday. Almost time for spring break. I know you guys are ready. All right, big question today. Do you miss me yet? Be honest, Nick. Well, I can honestly say, that I do miss this class. So I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you enjoy your spring break. And we are going to cover a lesson today. We're going to cover 9.6, and it has to do with more factoring. Like I said, you guys are going to be doing factoring for as long as you take a math course, which here at the high school is going to be for 4 years. All right, so this is a very, very important part of algebra, is to be able to factor. The factoring here will be a little bit tougher, but the method that we're going to use is called the guess and check method. Let me show you. Before, we had problems that looked like, x squared plus 7x plus 10. And we could factor that as x, and the signs are the same. And then for 10, it's pretty easy factor. And if I wanted to solve an equation to make it equal to 0, because that's why we factor, to find the zeros, we could find it easy enough. X plus 5 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, and subtract 5 from each side. Here, x equals -5. On the other equation, I could subtract 2 from each side, and x equals. All right, and that's what we've been doing the last couple days, factoring and then finding the zeros. And that's the same thing we're going to do today. But let me give you a couple of other little trinomials here. For instance, 2x squared. So our leading coefficient, remember that term, our leading coefficient is not going to be a 1 now. So you have 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. Now what do we do? Well, it's the same method, so we are going to factor. I'm going to put 2 parentheses. Now, let's look at the signs. I've got a negative and a positive. Now remember what I said. If your last term here, that 3, if your last term is a positive, both signs are the same. In this case, they're both going to be negative. And why is that? Because a negative times a negative is a positive, and then I can get a -7 on the inside. All right. Now, all I want you to look at when you're factoring these is we're looking at this first term and the last term. That's all I want you to think about for right now. So what times what is 2x squared? So that one's easy. It's 2x times x. 2x times x is 2x squared. And what about 3? Well, it's going to be 3 and 1, isn't it? Because it's the only things that you can multiply by to get 3. 3 times 1. But it could be 1 times 3. Because now it's going to matter where we put the 3 and where we put the 1. Let me show you. Let's say we put the 3 here and the 1. What's important now is that you check. Remember what I said our method was? Guess and check. Now you have to check, because I have to make sure I can get my middle term. If I can't, then I've done something wrong. Watch. using FOIL, 2x times x, 2x squared. Okay, no problem. Same thing as what I started with. 2x times negative 1. Well, that gives me a negative 2x. And then negative 3 times x is negative 3x. I'm using FOIL. And then negative 3 times negative 1, which is a positive 3. So it looks like I have my 2x squared, and it looks like I have my 3. But if you look at the middle terms here, a negative 2x minus 3x is negative 5x plus 3. What have I done wrong? That's not the way you factor that. So, here's what you have to do. You guessed wrong, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the 3 and the 1. Now I'm going to make it 1 and 3. Let's try that. Let's erase this. I checked it and it didn't work. So let's check it again. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 3, well, that's negative 6x. I'm using FOIL. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. And negative 1 times a negative 3 is a positive 3. And you see the difference here when I switch things around? Now when I add those two terms together, I'll have 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. And that's the right way to factor. And how do you know? Well, I'm not any better at it than you are. You and I are both going to use the same method. And that method is guess and check. Sometimes we're going to guess right. Sometimes we have to erase and try it again. Okay? Now I'm going to sort of combine this, and I'll give you a couple more examples. Let's do the same problem. And that's going to equal 0. So we'll find the zeros. Guessing and checking, and we're going to guess and check the right way this time. Okay, so we checked and we find out that that's the right way to factor. So now we solve. 2x minus 1 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. Add 1, and I have 2x equals 1, and then divide by 2. So x would equal 1/2. It's okay to have a fraction there. And over here, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And x is equal to 3. So we have 1/2 and 3 as our solutions. Okay. And I'll give you another example. Let's try 3n squared, or let's use x, plus 14x minus 5. All right? Now, I see a negative 5 there at the end. That means that my signs in the middle are going to be different. So what do we do here? Well, We're going to work, and then we'll set it equal to 0 afterwards. First of all, let's get the 3x squared. Let's get the first one. That one's fairly easy because the only things it could be is 3x times x. 3x times x is 3x squared. Now 5. What about 5? Well, I think it's going to be 1 and 5. It has to be either 1 and 5, remember, or 5 and 1. Now I have to get a negative 5, so we're going to make one of these positive, one of these negative. Have we factored it the right way? You have to check. Let's check it. If you check all your problems, you're going to get them all correct. All right, let's use FOIL now. First terms together, 3x squared. The outside terms, 3x times negative 5, negative 15x. And then 1 times x is 1x. We don't need the 1. And then 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. When I combine these two middle terms, I have 3x squared minus 14x minus 5. But guess what? I need a positive 14x. What did I do wrong? I think I've got all my numbers right, but I've got that middle sign wrong. So what I have to do is switch the signs. I'm going to have to make this one a positive and the first one a negative. Because if I do that, my outside terms, 3x times 5x, will give me a positive 15x. And negative 1 times x will give me a negative x. And 15x now minus x will give me a positive 14x. So I've factored it the correct way. And so the correct factor there is 3x minus 1 times x plus 5. Okay, the method, again, is guess and check. Now, if this were equal to 0, then we just solve those two little equations. I add 1 to both sides. 3x is equal to 1. Divide by 3. And x is equal to 1/3. And this other equation here, if I subtract 5 from each side, x is equal to negative 5. Okay, so a little bit different, a little bit tougher to factor. All right, so some of these problems you'll have for your homework are just factoring. And some of them, they'll equal 0. All right. Now, a couple more problems here. Because you're going to come across a problem that looks like this. Let me get another screen up here. You're going to come across a problem that looks like negative 5x squared plus 6x minus 1. It's not that hard of a factor, but I don't like that leading coefficient. You remember that term? I don't like that leading coefficient to be a negative. So here's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to factor it out. What does that mean? I have to take this first step. I mean, that's still negative 5x squared. But what about the 6x? Right, it's got to be a negative 6x. And what about the negative 1? We're going to make that a plus 1. So really what we're doing here is we're changing all the signs and putting the negative out front because it's a lot easier to factor this way. Let's factor. Leave the negative there. It's always going to be there. Put your two parentheses. All right. Now, that last sign there is positive. What that means is both signs are the same. But they're both negative because the middle one is negative. All right? So let's look at the 5x squared. Don't worry about that negative out front. That's just going to stay there. What about 5x squared? What times what is 5x squared? 5x and x. What about the 1? What times what gives you 1? Yeah, just 1 and 1. It's the only thing it could be. 1 times 1 is 1. And negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. Let's check. 5x times x, 5x squared. 5x times negative 1, negative 5x. Negative 1 times x, negative x. And negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. Now we got that negative is still out front. It's still hanging out front there. So yes, I get 5x squared minus 6x, minus 6x plus 1. And that's what this is. All right, so I was able to factor that okay. What if it equals 0? Okay, well, let's look at the factor here. Let's look at this line right here, this third line down. That says negative 5x minus 1 times x minus 1. What do we do with the negative on the outside? Nothing. Nothing. Either 5x minus 1 equals 0 or x minus 1 equals 0. And we solve those two equations. Add 1 to both sides. 5x is equal to 1. And then divide both sides by 5. X is equal to 1/5. And don't put that in your calculator. You don't have to write that as 0.2. 1/5 is okay. And then on the other side, add 1 to both sides. X is equal to 0 plus 1 or 1. Okay? Now, if you need to see that lesson again, you could go home and on your computer. You could ask Mr. Denzer to play it again. Or Mr. Johnson said he would come in and answer any questions that you might have. Okay? So, your homework for tonight is on page 5 596 and 597. I want you to do problems 4 through 47. Let's do 4 through 45. You know what? Before I give you your homework, I have to give you one more example. And I'll take a problem out of your homework. Okay? So let's take a problem that looks like this. This is one of your homework problems. And this is problem number 34. Negative 16k squared plus 8k. You know what? I'm going to change my mind here. Here's what I want you to do. For your homework tonight, I want you to do problems 4 through 25. All. Okay? I just want you to do that. And then tomorrow, we'll sort of continue with this, and we'll show you a couple of other things, a couple other problems you may run into that should help you a little bit. Okay? So that's what we're going to do for tonight.